Today's dinner is Anna's favorite, fajitas. I'm sure she'll love them. As I prepare the fajitas and set the table, envisioning Anna's joyful face, her eyes fill with excitement. But the next moment, after seeing the ingredients on the table, she suddenly looks downcast. "Look, Anna, your favorite fajitas. Aren't you gonna eat?" my husband asks, peering at Anna. But suddenly, she stands up from the table and heads straight to her bag, rummaging through it. As I watch her, puzzled, she pulls out a Tupperware container from her bag. "Can I take this home?" "I always feel sorry for Mom," she says, beginning to pack some of the dinner into the container. We are stunned by her sudden action. "What do you mean by that? Can you tell us?" Richard asks calmly. Anna's face darkens. "Mom gets yelled at by Dad if she eats. She says she can only eat leaves." We were shocked by Anna's words. Richard stands up quickly and rushes out of the house. I hurriedly try to stop him. "Wait, where are you going?" Without changing his expression, Richard picks up Anna and starts calling a taxi. "Hurry up. We're gonna go talk to Thomas right now." We immediately head to my daughter's house in the taxi. What we saw there was, "My name is Susan Jones. I worked as a preschool teacher, but I quit when I got married. I met Richard, my husband, when I was in my 20s, working as a preschool teacher. He was the son of a friend of my mother. Richard, an employee at a major company, was reserved and seemed unapproachable, but he was competent at his work. 8 years my senior, Richard had been unsuccessful in blind dates, with me being his 10th attempt. Having made it to the upper echelons of his company at a young age, Richard was well educated and had a high income. Richard was a bit difficult to approach, often quiet and not one to smile easily. He seemed to struggle with social interactions, mostly talking about work during our blind dates. Still, I gradually opened up to him, touched by his earnest efforts to share more about himself. I found out that he was more sensitive than I thought, a kind-hearted man who cared deeply about others. After our initial blind date, we started seeing each other more often. 3 months into knowing each other, he asked me to be his girlfriend. As our relationship deepened, we got married 2 years later, bought a house together, and built a happy home. We were living a fulfilling life. However, there was one issue that troubled us. 2 years into our marriage, we were still unable to have children. While our colleagues and friends who got married around the same time were already parents, we were not blessed with a child. Both of us loving children, we were often saddened by our inability to conceive. It was 5 years into our marriage, just when we were about to give up on having children, that we were blessed with our daughter, Harriet. We were overjoyed to finally be able to get pregnant. I remember feeling incredibly happy at the thought of finally becoming parents. Our lives began to shine when our long-awaited daughter, Harriet, was born. Everything in our life started revolving around her. Richard, usually busy with work, started turning down invitations from colleagues to come straight home for dinner, increasing our family time. On his days off, we even began taking trips, creating more family moments. We cherished our precious Harriet very much. As Harriet grew up and became a college student, she moved away from home. For us, still perceiving her as our little girl, this was a source of great anxiety. Richard was the most worried about her living alone. "Is Harriet eating properly?" "She's fine. She always keeps in touch." The photos of every meal sent daily by Harriet, now living alone, became our sole source of joy. Around a year after she left, Harriet called with a cheerful voice, saying she had someone she wanted us to meet. Nervously, we met them during a long break when they visited our home. "I'm in a relationship with Harriet," said Thomas, a well-dressed man in a neat suit, who studied in the same department as her. They had hit it off in the same club and started dating. Though we were initially unsettled by Harriet's first boyfriend, we gradually warmed up to the friendly and cheerful Thomas. He started visiting our home with Harriet on several occasions. Since Harriet was our only child, we never had another. Perhaps because of that, we grew to love Thomas like a son. Richard and Thomas seemed to really get along, often going out for drinks together. Thomas and we connected like a real family. Then Harriet graduated from college and landed a job at a major corporation in the city. We were so proud of her and wholeheartedly supported her as she embarked on her career. A few months later, it seemed Thomas had proposed to her. Since their workplaces were far apart, they hadn't been living together. Harriet decided to marry, moved by Thomas's desire to always be together. With this, she chose to become a homemaker. She had wanted to continue working, but Thomas had expressed his wish for her to take care of the home. Accepting his words, Harriet quit her job to become a full-time homemaker. But at that time, we realized we should have known Thomas better. As a homemaker, Harriet supported the household and visited us about every 6 months. After marrying and living in the city, she couldn't come to see us often due to Thomas's busy work schedule. He seemed to have gotten busier with work after marriage, often staying late for overtime. Harriet told us about this in our daily phone calls, saying she waited for Thomas with dinner prepared late into the night. Though Thomas came home tired, Harriet's voice over the phone also sounded weary. "Are you getting enough sleep? It's good to wait for Thomas, but you can't neglect your health." Harriet assured me brightly that she was okay. However, she recently mentioned feeling a bit unwell, feeling sleepy every day and disliking the smell of foods she used to enjoy cooking. I never had this issue before. Harriet was sad that she suddenly couldn't eat the foods she loved, and I had a hunch about her condition. Worried about her health, I suggested she visit a doctor. At first, she was puzzled but trusted my advice and agreed to go. "I think something wonderful is about to happen to you." About a month later, Harriet called, saying she had something to tell me. Normally, she would schedule a call, but this unexpected call took me by surprise. "Hello? Is everything okay?" I asked, sounding concerned. Over the phone, I could hear Harriet's voice, unable to contain her excitement. I wondered what had happened. "I'm pregnant," she said joyfully. I clapped my hands in happiness. She was indeed pregnant. When she first mentioned not feeling well, it reminded me of the early symptoms I had when I was pregnant with her. It turns out she's about 2 months along and has already told Thomas. I was overjoyed to hear my only daughter's pregnancy news and congratulated her. The thought of having a grandchild made me incredibly happy. The idea that my daughter, whom I've cherished and raised, was going to be a mother herself was heartwarming. That evening, when Richard came home from work, I told him about Harriet's pregnancy. He cried tears of joy, more than I did. Having never seen him cry before, I was profoundly surprised. "It feels like a dream that Harriet is going to be a mother. She was so little back then," Richard said with deep emotion, making me feel happy too. We had struggled to have children after getting married, so the news of our dear daughter being pregnant filled our hearts with warmth. Seizing the opportunity of Harriet's pregnancy, we frequently took several hours to visit her. Harriet, now without Thomas due to his work, had more severe morning sickness than I did. Realizing the physical strain on her, I got Harriet and Thomas's consent to help with household chores. Thankfully, Harriet's condition gradually improved with my help. A few months later, she safely gave birth to a baby girl. Since Thomas couldn't be there for the delivery, we were by Harriet's side instead. It seemed like she struggled every day, trying to juggle unfamiliar parenting and household duties in Thomas's absence. It must have been hard for Harriet, a full-time homemaker, to manage everything alone. When we saw Harriet starting to show signs of exhaustion from parenting, we made a suggestion to Thomas. "Is it true there's a good house available?" We told Thomas about a new single-family home. A friend of Richard's had built it but had to sell it suddenly due to a job transfer. Without any takers and about to put it up for sale, he consulted Richard. Knowing Harriet and Thomas had been considering buying a house since their marriage, Richard immediately brought it up. We also knew from Harriet that their current home was becoming too small, especially with the birth of their daughter, Anna. So, we proposed to Thomas that now was a great time to buy the house at a good price. It would mean moving a bit from the city to the countryside, but it was in the neighboring state, making it easier for me to visit Harriet. That was part of our thinking too. To our surprise, Thomas readily agreed, and Harriet and he decided to move into a single-family home. With the move decided, we too pitched in to help. On moving day, I noticed Harriet's complexion seemed a bit off, something I hadn't seen in a while. "You don't look too well. Is something wrong?" Harriet, hesitating, just shook her head and said it was nothing. Perhaps it was exhaustion from parenting. "Don't overdo it. Even as a mother, you need breaks." "Thank you, Mom. I'm fine, just a little tired," Harriet replied with a troubled smile. I watched her with concern, wondering if she disliked the new house. But seeing her return to her usual calm demeanor, I decided not to worry. After the move, it was easier for us to visit each other. Thomas had arranged a transfer at work to a location closer to the new house. We used to spend hours traveling to Harriet's house, but now Harriet herself comes to visit and stay at our house. Watching Anna toddle around the house, I realized she no longer resembled a baby. Each visit surprised us with her rapid growth. Anna's gotten so big lately, and it's tough keeping an eye on everything. Harriet sighed. Seeing her weary, I couldn't help but laugh. Reminded of how Harriet was as a child, always on the move, darting off the moment you looked away. Sharing this memory with Harriet, she smiled wryly and asked to stop reminiscing about the past. Now 3 years old, Anna quickly chased after anything that caught her interest. Watching her, I was constantly reminded of how fast children grow. "Grandma, let's play over here." Anna's innocent smile reminded me of the time when she was born. The child who couldn't even run back then has grown so much. This made me feel a mix of happiness and a bit of sadness. Children grow up so fast, don't they? Maybe you'll have a second one soon? "Stop it, Mom. That's not true," I joked. Harriet's face suddenly darkened at my words. She gave a brief, heavy response and ended the conversation. Since Anna's birth, I've noticed Harriet's complexion hasn't been great. She used to laugh and brush things off, but she never showed such a clearly gloomy expression before. What could be happening? I wanted to ask Harriet, but the conversation quickly moved on, and I couldn't find the right moment. Harriet and Anna used to visit us every 2 months. But after Anna turned 6, they stopped coming. They always used to talk to us at our house, but lately, it's been only phone calls. Harriet, who would usually talk about her parenting troubles, now coldly cuts off the calls. "I'm busy right now, sorry," she'd say without explanation before hanging up. I couldn't talk to Anna, whom I used to see so often, or even see Harriet's face. No matter how much I asked for a reason, she'd say nothing was wrong and end the conversation. Reluctantly, I tried calling Thomas, but his response was equally curt. "Sorry, I'm busy right now. Can we talk later?" After being abruptly cut off with a cold voice on the phone, it seemed nothing I said was getting through anymore. Richard also tried calling a few times after discussing it with me, but he got the same indifferent response. "What's going on with Harriet and her family? They used to come to our house so often," Richard said, looking downcast, and I nodded in agreement. We both felt uneasy about Harriet and Anna suddenly stopping their visits without any discussion. But a few days later, something changed. Previously, Harriet used to call, but now, it was mostly Thomas. One day, Thomas called to give us an update, but I happened to be out, so Richard answered the phone. "Is work keeping you busy? Anna must be quite grown up now, being a senior in kindergarten." Richard chatted casually, but Thomas seemed indifferent. Unable to hear his daughter and granddaughter's voices, Richard, losing patience, asked Thomas, "We haven't seen your faces in a while. When would be a good time for us to visit?" Thomas seemed reluctant and initially turned down the suggestion. However, Richard, not having seen Harriet or Anna's faces for over 2 months, insisted. Thomas kept saying he was too busy with work, but Richard kept persuading, saying they would just visit quickly and leave. Then Thomas made an unexpected proposal. The summer vacation is coming up soon, right? I want to let Anna practice riding the train, so can she stay with you alone? Richard was taken aback by Thomas's words. Just then, I returned home and overheard Richard on the phone discussing letting only Anna stay with us. We exchanged glances, deeply concerned. We felt uneasy about letting our still very young, 6-year-old granddaughter take the train alone. Despite my urging to reconsider, Thomas was adamant about Anna traveling alone for the experience, saying she could handle it. Anna is 6 now. She'll be fine by herself. He insisted, leaving us unable to argue further. Of course, we wanted to see Anna, but I also really wanted to see Harriet, my daughter. I was concerned about her since she had been complaining about the difficulties of parenting, but in the end, Harriet didn't come, saying she was too busy with housework. So, it was decided that only Anna would stay at our house. Although I was saddened not to see Harriet, the thought of seeing Anna after such a long time made my heart leap. As the summer vacation approached, and the day arrived for Anna to stay over, we anxiously waited at the train station. As soon as she got off the train and spotted us, Anna ran towards us with a big smile. Reuniting with Anna after such a long time brought an overwhelming joy. "Grandpa! Grandma! I made it here all by myself," she reported happily. Seeing her growth, we hugged her tightly, our worries melting away. "You did great. We're so proud of you. We're so happy to see you after such a long time." We praised Anna for her brave solo train ride, and she shyly smiled in response. Savoring our long-awaited reunion, we stopped to buy Anna's favorite snacks on our way home. That day, we played until the evening, making up for the time we hadn't seen each other. After not being able to see Anna for just a few months, she learned to read and even read us a storybook she brought along. We started preparing dinner while cherishing her significant growth. While Anna was taking a shower, I prepared her favorite dish, fajitas. Seeing the table lined with her favorite ingredients, Anna, fresh out of the bath, was ecstatic and dug in eagerly. "All my favorite things!" Anna exclaimed happily, clinging to the table with a smile that made me happy too. As we sat down, Anna suddenly looked down. Puzzled, I tilted my head to look at her, and Richard, concerned, spoke up. "Look, Anna, your favorite fajitas. Aren't you gonna eat?" Richard asks, peering at Anna. But suddenly, she stands up from the table and heads straight to her bag, rummaging through it. As I watch her, puzzled, she pulls out a Tupperware container from her bag. "Can I take this home? I always feel sorry for Mom." Suddenly saying that, Anna began packing the dinner into a container. Seeing me puzzled about why she needed to do that, Richard quickly asked for an explanation. "What do you mean by that? Can you tell us?" Anna, looking sad and casting her gaze downward, stumbled over her words in response to Richard's gentle inquiry. "Mom gets yelled at by Dad if she eats. She says she can only eat leaves." I was left speechless by Anna's unexpected words. What could have happened to Harriet and her family during the time we couldn't see them? Unable to comprehend Anna's words, Richard suddenly stood up from his seat. Sensing something was amiss, he grabbed his smartphone and wallet and hurried out of the house. "Wait, where are you going?" I hurriedly tried to stop Richard as he dashed out of the house, calling out to him. But Richard, without changing his expression, picked up Anna and began hailing a taxi. "Hurry up. We're gonna go talk to Thomas right now." After saying this, we hurriedly got into a cab that arrived a few minutes later. Richard, gripping my hand strongly, seemed unable to hide his surprise at the sudden turn of events. He reassured Anna, who was anxiously fidgeting with her fingers between us, telling her it was going to be okay. At that moment, Richard took a deep breath and looked at Anna. "Grandpa and Grandma are going to give Mom and Dad a surprise visit right now. Can you help us so we can rescue Mom?" Richard said, looking directly at Anna, who lit up and nodded eagerly at his words. Watching them, I took a deep breath and decided to change my mindset. Such a small child shouldn't have to be this sad. I repeatedly assured Anna that everything was okay as I comforted her. Do you know of any place in the house, like in the garden or something, where we can see inside? Can you tell us? Richard asked gently, and Anna, as if remembering something, nodded vigorously. I know. I'm really good at hide and seek, she declared confidently, puffing out her chest, and Richard hugged her tightly. About an hour later, we arrived at the house and decided to observe the inside from behind the exterior wall. The lights inside seemed to be still on, and we could see into the living room. Anna, with excited breaths, guided us, saying this way. We ran to a spot in the shadow of the trees in the yard, smartphones in hand. Anna, perhaps finding the outdoor hide and seek fun, beamed with joy. My heart ached seeing her like this, and I hugged her protectively. Our hiding spot was right in front of a small window covered with a screen. We could clearly see into the living room, and Richard quickly got his smartphone ready. Suddenly, we heard a loud voice yelling from inside the house. Richard pointed his smartphone towards the source of the noise and started recording a video. It appeared that Thomas was yelling at Harriet inside the house. A chill ran through my body. As I saw Harriet, who looked like a completely different person from before. Her once glossy long hair had turned into an unkempt, tangled mess. Moreover, she had become terribly thin, her face pale and drawn. As I stared in shock, Richard frowned with frustration, continuing to record the scene. Thomas's yelling was loud enough to reach us outside, causing Anna to tremble. It seemed to be a regular occurrence. That our beloved daughter and granddaughter were subjected to such cruelty was infuriating. I bit my lip in rising anger. Then, as Thomas's voice grew louder and he raised his hand at Harriet, Richard dashed out. Stop it right now. What are you doing? Richard shouted towards the window, drawing Thomas and Harriet's attention to us. What? Why are you here? Thomas began to panic. Seizing the moment, Harriet unlocked the screen door and threw herself into my arms. She had become so frail that I hesitated to embrace her. It's not what it seems. There's a reason for this. Thomas, realizing he was at a disadvantage, started making excuses, but Richard glared at him. Be quiet. None of that matters now. Our daughter's life is the top priority. Richard yelled back, his voice raising in anger, leaving Thomas pale and lost for words. I stepped forward protectively in front of a frightened Anna and Harriet. Meanwhile, Richard kept watch to make sure Thomas didn't do anything. We watched as an ambulance arrived and took Harriet to the hospital. Immediately afterward, Richard contacted the police to report that his daughter was a victim of abuse. The police arrived promptly, and Richard provided them with the video he had recorded. As a result, Thomas was arrested on the spot and taken to the police station. A house search began, and Anna gave testimony that Thomas had been regularly hitting Harriet. Inside the house, the police found Thomas's diary, which detailed his regular abuse of Harriet. The diary revealed his dissatisfaction with Harriet not returning to her pre-pregnancy figure after giving birth to Anna. Thomas had been forcing Harriet to follow an extreme diet, monitoring her weight daily, and controlling her meals rigorously. The diet included things like only 3 leaves of lettuce per day. It was then that we finally understood the meaning behind Anna's earlier statement about only being allowed to eat leaves. Initially, Harriet resisted and showed defiance to Thomas, but she would be beaten if she ate anything other than the diet food. Frightened, she eventually complied. Thomas's diary even mentioned how Anna tried to intervene to help her mother, and got hit for her efforts, leading to Harriet no longer resisting. From the police, we learned the extent of the terrible ordeal Harriet and Anna had been through. The regret was unbearable. According to the police, Thomas was deeply remorseful. But there was no doubt he would face a prison sentence for his abuse of Harriet and Anna. We held a left-alone Anna tightly, comforting her. Later, Harriet and Thomas got divorced. All of Thomas's actions had come to light, leading to his prosecution. After that, we started living together with Harriet, who was still recovering her health. Anna was overjoyed to live with us permanently. Being free from Thomas's regular abuse, Harriet slowly began to recover her health. Her once emaciated body started to fill out, gradually returning to a healthy shape. "I caused so much trouble for you both," Harriet said with a look of guilt, but I shook my head. I never wanted to see Harriet that thin again. With this determination, we continued to care for our precious daughter, and now she had fully regained her former self. To celebrate Harriet's recovery, we laid out fajitas on the table, the meal we missed on that day. Anna's eyes sparkled with joy at the sight of the spread. "There's so much! We can eat a lot!" "Yes, it's wonderful to be able to eat to our heart's content," Harriet said. Watching the two of them devouring the fajitas, we wished for this peaceful life to continue forever.